Hello everyone and welcome to the Activist Lawyer podcast. My name is Sarah Henry and I'm your host to this podcast, which offers a platform for lawyers to share their story and their journey into law and activism. Our guests will discuss the challenges and highlights of their work, as well as important cases, opinions on legal and political matters, and will offer up advice and tips for anyone interested in pursuing a career in human rights law, public interest law or criminal justice. The Activist Lawyer podcast is brought to you by the Granite Podcast Studio. Thank you so much for listening. Today is the first episode of our new series of Activist Lawyer, and I interview Miglena Ilieva, who is the founding partner of ILEX Law Group, a law firm specialising in UK and Irish immigration law. Miglena is a dual qualified solicitor in Ireland and in England and Wales, with over 15 years of experience in immigration law. Her practice covers nationality, asylum, human rights, personal and corporate immigration. Miglena also provides courses and training for the Immigration Advice Authority exams with prominent UK immigration publication Free Movement. Originally from Bulgaria, Miglena moved to the UK as a teenager, and her personal experience informs her practical, client-focused approach. She's handled a wide range of cases, including high-profile and complex matters, but also undertakes extensive pro bono work. Miglena has lived and worked across 4 continents and is co-chair of the International Women's Rights Committee at the New York Women's Bar Association and previously co-chaired the Professional Support Lawyers Group at ILPA. So a really great episode to start off with. I hope you all enjoy today's recording, which is focused on immigration, unsurprisingly. And we look forward to bringing you many more episodes covering a range of legal issues with fantastic activist lawyers. Thank you, and please remember to share and review where possible. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first in the new season of the Activist Lawyer podcast. I am delighted to be back after a short summer break. I hope everybody enjoyed themselves. Miglena, thank you for joining me today.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Where did you drove from Dublin today, was it?
I did that whole hour and a half to Newry.
And you got here in one piece.
I'm glad to report it was actually a very smooth drive. And I listened to my radio without screaming children in the background, so it was quite therapeutic for me. Very good,
very good. And yes, as I said, it's lovely to have you in the studio today and also to be back on our podcast. I actually missed it for a while there. I'm glad to have you kicking off what will be a great season full of guests and full of chat of all legal matters, covering a broad range of issues. And with yourself today, we are going to discuss immigration primarily. Yep. And your unique journey into law. We've a little bit of a different perspective today, which I'm glad to cover. But let's go back in time a little bit and share your journey and what brought you into the law.
Well, what brought me to the law? I think it was a combination of things. The first one was that apparently my mum tells me I was always very good at arguing my case. When I was little, so whenever I was told to do something or not do something, I'd always have a ready response. So my mum always jokingly said, "Oh, this one's going to be a lawyer, one day." So it was always in the back of my head that maybe I had some hidden talents there. So that was kind of always there. But moving on from that, I think it was also just becoming a lawyer isn't easy, isn't straightforward in most cases. So it was just hard work, sheer determination, and I think a huge amount of luck as well.
Really?
Yeah.
So that seed was planted maybe from a very early stage. I might try that with my children and see, does it work? And kind of, carve that career path early on.
This is it. I feel like I fulfilled that destiny.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And was that in Bulgaria? Did you do your training there or where did you?
No, I did my training in the UK. I moved to the UK when I was 15. So... and that's part of the whole story of how I got into law was actually having that transition from a Bulgarian teenager to suddenly going to a school in London, an inner city school, and how I come out of that becoming a solicitor.
Yeah.
So, it wasn't a straightforward, smooth path, but we got there in the end.
You got there in the end. And now the next part of that question is immigration, which is the area of practice that you primarily focus on and have done for many years now. How did you get into immigration law in particular?
I kind of fell into it, and I think I mentioned it earlier as we were chatting that I now can't imagine doing anything other than immigration in terms of being a lawyer. But I totally fell into it. I started an internship at a high street firm. This is how I got to be offered my training contract. If you might recall that. I know that nowadays you don't have to have one, but at the time it was very much needed to become a solicitor, and I was offered an internship at this high street firm. Most of the work they were doing was immigration, and I was really keen to learn more, and I was quite proactive. In the end, I applied for the training contract, and I'll never forget my boss sort of going, "Oh, but if you want the job, you've got it." And I thought, really? I couldn't. After all the emails and motivational letters and CV sending and applications, and it just came down to, I did an internship, and that's what happened, and I was given a job. I had to do 12 months of paralegaling before I could do the training contract. So it really gave me that early experience of immigration, and it was quite funny. It was a Turkish sort of law firm, and I used to have loads of Turkish clients, and I don't know if it was the positive reinforcement. I used to get baklava. Every time I'd get someone I'd help get someone a visa, they'd come with this big box of baklava. So I just thought, wow, I'm in it for the long run. And Brilliant. But no, on a more serious note, I think I just really enjoyed helping people, because immigration is one of those things that affects all of their livelihood. So it was just nice to be a part of that, and there's no better feeling than helping someone be able to achieve whatever they were set out to achieve. So
very rewarding. Well, just before we delve into your current work now at the moment, I note that you've worked quite globally, and you've actually taken your work around the world with you, and I'm interested to find out how that worked. So you've been in London working, New York, and in Dublin, of course, which is where you're currently based. And so quite demanding legal markets as well in terms of clients. What have you learned about kind of, I suppose, navigating immigration law through working in these different jurisdictions and cities?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the one constant has been, I've always really specialised in UK immigration until recently, when I cross-qualified in Ireland. And I also added Irish immigration law to kind of my services. But it was an area of law that I knew, that I felt comfortable with. So it didn't matter where I was based, it was always the same kind of work. Clients always needed, either it was some sort of a corporate client who needed to transfer employees, or it was a young family, or whoever, parents, grandparents, whatever it was. But it was always a very similar scenario. So it really, the location itself, it didn't really matter. What mattered was that the moving around actually helped me connect with clients in a way that I wouldn't have been able to had I not done. And I'll give you a background of where we've lived just here, because it's not just the places that we've mentioned. We had a pit stop in Colombia, in Bogota, for 2 years. And prior to that, we were in Tel Aviv in Israel for about 4.5 years. All of that is also in the context of my husband's job, and why we're currently in Dublin, is for a new metro. So we've moved around to places wherever they're either building a new metro, or there's some sort of a big maintenance project going on. And my job has allowed me to do that. And it's not every employer that would be okay with that, but my previous employer happened to be, so I was quite lucky.
Good, because that would terrify me. The thought of moving, to another, I think I'd have to retrain. And so I think you're quite brave to approach it in that way. And it's really interesting. Yeah. And I'm sure it does inform your work and your relationship with your clients. And just on that, I know that your work in both jurisdictions spans quite a wide spectrum. Isn't that right? You do asylum, human rights, and then some corporate immigration and nationality law. How do you, I suppose, balance that diverse, because immigration, it's not easy. It's quite a complex area. I'm thinking of you doing it between two jurisdictions as well. Is there maybe a particular area that you're more drawn to, or what way does it work for you at the moment?
Absolutely. I tend to want to combine my interests with the work that pays the fees. It's one of those where immigration law isn't one of the best paid areas of law. It depends on obviously the
not.
spectrum where you are. Yes. So it's one of those where I've often felt that, what do I enjoy? I enjoy personal immigration. I enjoy helping people that are in difficult situations. But does that pay the bills? No. So I kind of tried to combine that, my passion, with also assisting companies where the relationship between myself and the client isn't as emotionally charged, should I say?
Yes, of course. It's a different dynamic.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's very much transactional and I enjoy sort of doing that work because I know that work is important in order to cover my fees, to help me also help the clients that I need to help, and where I need to drop fees, do things pro bono,
Sure.
Those are the kind of things so I tend to balance it out.
To balance it, that's good. And I think people are moving in that way. I mean, a lot of practitioners that have been in contact here in the north would have that balance as well. And none of it easy. We're always trying to keep up with an ever changing environment in terms of immigration wherever you're based. I think more so now, but just kind of moving into that. It's bureaucratic, hostile at times as well for our clients. We're all aware of that. It's a very politically charged, politically sensitive area of the law. And I'm wondering what kind of your perspective is in that, and maybe how, you keep up with those changes and how it feeds into your kind of work with your clients. It's not easy that's my experience. It's
absolutely. It's impossible sometimes to understand what is going on. And we're trained lawyers and we find it difficult, let alone a client who is just seeing words on a page that make zero sense. And I say that as someone who felt the same way. Talking about sort of working globally, one of the things that I did, which I think helped the transition, was I took on the role of a professional support lawyer at my previous firm. And that really gave me the time to be able to digest changes. My job was to keep the knowledge up within the firm. So train the team and provide external training where it needed to happen or whatever it was. But it was a slightly different role. I did some client work, but also I really moved. I shifted my position there. It lent itself to my way of living at the time a little better. It meant that I didn't have to be on a call at 9 a.m. UK time when I was in Colombia, for example. So as part of my role as a professional support lawyer, it was my job to actually digest the changes. So the statement of changes days, I mean,
fair play to you.
Oh, those were the worst days, except for when maybe statistics were published. We used to also do this annual roundup of the net migration figures, and it was always sort of a race to get to some sort of a press release of like trying to figure out what was going to be released, and then on the day, literally as soon as they released at 9 o'clock or whatever it was, to just make sure that my press release is correct and I've not said anything that's incorrect, and I'd send it out to publicists in the media, and it was just anyway. So that was just a bit of a flavor of also what being a lawyer might look like, because being a lawyer occasionally is doing other things that are not necessarily client related.
Exactly, yeah. But it is, I mean, it's that kind of added element. I'm not saying other areas of law aren't that complex, but it's forever changing. And we spoke a little bit earlier on before we come on, of course, when we talk about immigration, we're talking about the headlines, the language that's being used. I mean, not only does it affect your clients who need immigration support, but it affects communities. And it's very divisive. Looking at what's happening in America, we see it in terms of communities being divided. We're seeing kind of populist language being used across the EU. And it's becoming normalised, isn't it? And when we're reading that, only that we kind of have or do work closely with, we see the impact. And anybody I know from even previous clients, they're worried and they're afraid. So I'm wondering what you think about these, I suppose, the double standards as well that are being applied. For example, we mentioned the Ukraine scheme, and it was great to see governments react to, but we're not seeing it with Palestinians, for example, or people who are fleeing any other kind of war that's happening at the minute. What's your kind of thoughts on maybe that language and how how do you get through it? Because it is difficult.
I really love being on the Activist podcast because it's a nice way to turn the meaning of that, because the whole thing around the activist lawyer was a negative connotation. It was as if we were doing something that we shouldn't be doing, that with, and we're just there to interpret the rules. The whole language around immigration has been dreadful. And moving to Ireland, I was a little bit heartened to see that, at least from the government perspective, I went to some conferences and things, and you know, and it just felt like the language around immigration was not as toxic as it is in the UK right now. I know that could change maybe down the line. I've no idea, but currently I feel like with the UK, I cannot believe what's going on. And it felt like at times I've actually wondered myself whether opening up an immigration practice is a good idea, because you know, you've got newspapers that are set out to go and you know, sort of have your picture plastered on a paper and declare you sort of public enemy number one.
Exactly. And that's, I mean, it's interesting you referencing the activist lawyer, but we started this podcast 5 years ago or so because of exactly, you know, the reference that you alluded to there, the negative connotation. But since that, we've still had immigration lawyers from all jurisdictions under real threat. And that's, it's interesting to hear, you know.
Absolutely. So you kind of feel a bit... Going back to a personal decision to carry on doing this area of law, I wouldn't change it for the world. If someone came, you know, throwing stones at my way, I don't care. You know, it's one of those things that it's the kind of stuff I do. I like to do it. I like to stand up for people who can't stand up for themselves. I like to be able to make that change. And it's important that people like myself and others, I'm not obviously alone in this arena at all, but that we're allowed to just exist and do our work.
To do your job. And I mean, it's that separation as well, even though you are closely connected with your clients, it's emotionally charged work. You are their representative and you're there to, you know, represent your client in an independent capacity. So, you know, it is worrying that hasn't gone away and we're still seeing it. But we can't be surprised when we have government using ministers and the media using language that is hostile. And
definitely. And it's been disappointing with this current government, I must say, because it was very easy since a few elections back, you know, when the whole hostile environment policy was created. It's been very easy to kind of think, oh God, you know, what are we talking about? Like, what are these policies? And I just had this feeling that with Labour, maybe things will improve.
We all did.
And I'm just sad to see and to say that it hasn't. If anything, the recent white paper that was published is just pulling the rug underneath people's feet. You know, it's just, and not even previous governments that were set out on all that toxic language and policy around immigration, not even they did that. So I'm really disappointed. It's
really disappointing. It's shocking. The fact that, you know, there's a halt on family reunification now is just absolutely appalling. And that the convention, the refugee convention, is just being ripped up and torn in the bin by people who were once human rights lawyers.
Absolutely. So,
Anyway, we are where we are and we will plough through it. But on that, you've mentioned there, I you know, and I'm thankful to you for sharing, you know, your journey in setting up your own firm and kind of the challenges that are involved in that. But if somebody's listened, that is a big leap to take. What made you set up your own practice in the end, and what's the challenges been, if any?
There's just been a few. I don't know if that's for everyone, and I don't know if it's for me still. I'm very new into it. I've really only been operational for about 6 months. So I'm still kind of finding my feet and every day kind of wondering, what have I done? Would I change it? No. I think so far it's given me the freedom that I wanted. I wanted to be able to do school pickups, for example. I want to be able to still, while my children are young and they do want to spend time with me, because that would change very quickly. But while they do want me around, I kind of wanted to be around a little bit more. At times I find that obviously, as with everything, it's just requires a balance, and I can't always get the right balance. And I'm still sort of finding my feet with that, sort of giving myself to the business, but also, you know, having children and having a family and moving countries in the meantime, you know, and kind of combining all of that and trying to stay sane. To stay sane in this whole process.
That's a priority. That's a priority.
And it's not easy, but it's been great. I think some of the biggest really challenge I find with the business is working on my own. Like, I find that I'm a very social person, so I really miss the company of others, and that's been the biggest. Obviously, aside from having to learn about websites and hosting and
the day-to-day ins and outs of running a business versus then the actual immigration work.
Absolutely.
And it is an area that you like to bounce ideas off people, because there's a little bit of uncertainty that comes with any case, I suppose.
Yep.
And on that, I suppose you're building your own caseload as well. Are there any cases in particular that kind of stand out for you at the moment, or?
Yeah. Well, it's good I'm on this podcast right now because
oh, good.
Currently I'm dealing with a couple of cases that I thought, wow, it's just as with these things, you always learn about something that's lacking in the system through getting to this point with a client, and I've one of the things that and it kind of goes back to the anti-immigration feeling in the UK, I think. But one of the cases is a Windrush case. I just assisted with a Windrush status application for someone who has lived in the UK since the 60s. She's now, this lady's in her 70s. She's lived in the UK since she was a teenager. Very much British. She's married to a Brit. Her children are British. Her mother was also British. So she just happened to be born in a Commonwealth country. She wasn't born in the UK. So anyway, long story short, we got her the status. To be fair to the Home Office, it was a free of charge application and it got resolved within a week of her biometrics appointment. Brilliant. She was given British citizenship from the outset. She didn't have to pay a penny. She didn't have to do a citizenship ceremony. Great. But then looking at the compensation scheme, and this is where I have a bit of an issue. Well, I have a huge issue, actually. The compensation scheme is separate from the status scheme. And it means that you have to submit another application, and you have to prove your losses resulting directly from you not having had proof of your status. And one of the ways to do that is to show that there's been an impact to your life. So obviously, you can claim for things like lost income because you lost a job, or something that is more easily quantifiable. Whereas, how do you quantify an impact to your life? This particular lady, like I said, she's been in the UK for so long, and she was put off from traveling because since the hostile environment, every time she would re-enter the UK with her Commonwealth passport, she would be stopped, and some younger immigration border guard would say, "How are you living in the UK? You can come in without a visa, but how are you living? We can let you in." She happens to be Canadian. She can enter without a visa, but they're sort of saying to her, "But you have no visa to live here," and right. She's trying to explain, "No, but I've lived here since the it was just, and it caused her so much embarrassment. She was asked to stay on one side until they worked out what to do with her. It happened a few times to the point where she decided she wasn't traveling anymore. She just didn't want to travel. Yeah. She missed out on weddings, on funerals, all of that stuff. And when they came to me, obviously we did the application, and thankfully that was resolved really quickly. But how do you quantify this loss? And now looking back at looking at the compensation scheme, it's just under 50 pages of an application form that's there to just people off. It's not an application that is there to make it easier. So really, one of the things, the Activist Lawyer podcast, I kind of want to draw attention to this fact that I personally think if someone's eligible for status under the Windrush scheme, they should also automatically be eligible for compensation. Yeah. And I find that with this and previous governments, I feel like there's a lot of lip service around, with the Windrush generation, there's so much contribution, and what have we done and how we've treated them. Let's name London, if you know this, that they recently named one of the rail lines, the Windrush line.
I didn't.
Great. It's a bit like banging the pots and pans for nurses during COVID, but not giving them an actual pay rise, and it's exactly that hypocrisy of like, we've named a train line after you. Great. But when it comes to actual compensation, no, you have to fill out a 50-page form. You might not get anything, and you'll have to wait a good year to 18 months to 2 years to even hear back. And that is insufficient. That is just not on, especially with some of the people with Windrush, by definition. They're old. Yeah. And they should not be put in that situation. So if the government did feel as if they wanted to redress some of the issues that generation experienced, that would be a starting point.
Gosh.
Automatic compensation for anyone that you accept as eligible under the status scheme.
As the bare minimum.
Bare minimum, Wow. So that's
a big issue.
Absolutely. So now I'm just having to advise on whether they should pursue it. And it's one of those things. You either do it pro bono, or you kind of go into it. They'd have to pay fees for a lawyer to kind of assist, but then they don't know if they're going to get anything out of it. So anyway, that's one. And another one, which also I found particularly offensive, is a victim of domestic violence recently came to me, and I was kind of looking into this, and but it's around, and it's a broader issue of fees in the UK, in UK immigration applications. They are extortionately high, and I was looking at the latest on the fee for indefinite leave to remain for a victim of domestic violence, and that's just over £3,000. That's in line with all other applications, and again, I thought that this, and yes, there is a fee exemption if you're destitute. Yeah. But your average applicant who is on about 30,000, on average in the UK, would not be destitute by definition. No. And that's the vast majority of people in the UK in that position. Nurses are around that salary band. This particular person I'm assisting is a social worker, and she's in that sort of salary band. And so she's not destitute, so she'll have to pay the fee. And then you have this situation where she was married to a British citizen. She was a victim of domestic violence, and she had a mortgage and a job to keep at the point when she was breaking up and with the relationship was breaking down. So she's then in a position to either have 3,000 at the ready and just make an application, or she'll have to think of plan B. And she thought of plan B, and she was also eligible for a skilled worker visa, so she switched. Her employer was very supportive. They switched her, they paid the fees, which was a big issue for her. Anyway, she's now on a skilled worker visa, but where does that leave her? It leaves her now ineligible potentially for the indefinite leave to remain application, because she doesn't have a spouse visa. So one of the requirements she now doesn't meet. Of course. And now she's submitting a discretionary application, because you can submit a discretionary application in these circumstances, but you're putting that 3,000 on the line for someone's discretion, where you're just not sure if it's going to go, which way it's going to go. So I just think, again, a bit like with the Windrush, sort of scheme, yes, have a fee for this application. I understand that they want to deter people, but don't make it punitive. Don't make, I mean, 3,000 is a huge sum of money to save up. If you're on income of, say, £2,000 net a month, and you've got expenses that are, 1,500.
But we don't hear about the fees.
No.
You will not hear about the fees.
Absolutely.
And one of the families that I worked with here, a family from South Africa, both mum and dad working 2 jobs, applying for indefinite leave to remain. The fees that they paid before for an application that went AWOL, it was lost, their documents lost, they just had to repay it again. They're afraid to complain in case that jeopardizes any future applications. And we counted up for them and their children literally thousands that they had to work the 2 jobs. One of them was really to fund immigration applications that had to be made. And then, of course, you've your exams and all of the rest that go along with it. That is never covered by the press. No. And I remember moving from maybe working in the south of Ireland to being really surprised by the level of fees and the various different application forms that can apply to so many different circumstances. It is, I feel, deliberately complex for not only trained immigration lawyers, but anybody who wishes to apply for any of these types of residency applications.
Could not agree more. I could not agree more. So.
And I'm afraid we're stuck with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's that. But yes, I think it's great that you drew attention to those 2 areas. I mean, there's hundreds more.
Yes,
the Windrush, I really have to admit, I must brush up on it. I do see a lot of lawyers who are involved in, I think there's a kind of a committee now as well that's trying to push this along. Yeah. But that's really interesting to see where we're at with compensation schemes. And I have to say, not really that surprising, given, the government and locally here, what we've seen in terms of redress schemes for victims of, historical and kind of industrial abuse as well. Yeah. So, but good to raise that, and let's follow your work around that too, which is fantastic. Just getting back to your job, and I suppose you've mentioned they're trying to strike this work-life balance, which I don't know if anyone has come on this podcast and said, yes, I've nailed it. No. I have it all in one. But you also, outside of your work, You're involved in organisations that I suppose complement your work as well. I'm talking about your leadership roles as well with the with ILPA, which I was a member of.
Immigration Law
Practitioners Association, and of course the New York Women's Bar Association. So what kind of drives you to take part in those organisations, and is it important to you and your work?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I think as the part of the activism of being a lawyer is also taking part in these associations, organisations, because it just makes the job of arguing a case that much simpler when you have, instead of one voice, when you have 10 voices saying the same thing. So ultimately, yes, it's the desire to achieve some sort of change in a meaningful way, in a way that might actually make a difference to someone. But also socially, they're great. Socially, it's great to build a network of people that have the same sort of thinking as you, the same sort of ideas, background in terms of what they do. And it's a really important role, actually, that I think I'd recommend to anyone to get involved with associations, with anyone that, like I said, can amplify the message. It is great.
And having that support from your colleagues as well. It's important, not just about, with immigration as well, it's not about just networking and getting to know people.
Yeah.
It's everybody's on the same page usually in terms of, you'd need, somebody might be an expert in, say, nationality law or, practice more in that. So it's great to kind of have that shared knowledge bank. And I always felt a little bit more confident once I got to know people through networking and through different organisations. And I have to say, I would have been lost without it. I don't think I could have actually continued. It was that vital.
Totally. And I kind of feel that immigration is a very specific case where, lawyers, we're actually quite collegial. And I think I'm not saying, obviously, there are different associations and, but I think immigration is one of those areas that really lends itself to people gathering together and we have one common enemy, which is the Home Office or whoever it is, the Department of Justice. Or, but they're very easy to dislike.
I agree.
So having that sort of common aim is great, and it really helps.
No, it's great. And you kind of have touched on this, but just the specific question around activism and the law. You've referenced it there in two of your cases, and I'm sure there are many more examples. But how do you think the two kind of work together, I suppose, in terms of making that change? I mean, in other areas of law, people will do their 9-to-5 law job, but how did the two marry up?
Absolutely. I think that, lawyers, we're like the original activists. I kind of feel that any job that you take on is something that you're taking on a case, you're trying to do the best possible case for it, and try and multiply that for other clients. That is in effect the activism part, but also is sort of seeing these issues that come up in your day-to-day life, a bit like what I've just described with those cases, and trying to do something, take a moment from your time, which could be outside of your 9-to-5 occasionally. And if you feel strongly enough about it, do something about it, because if you don't, then it might not happen. It might not get done. So have that sense of, and I think we as lawyers kind of have that inbuilt to a degree anyway, which is that sense of we want to do justice to whatever we're doing. Yeah. And sometimes it's a bit like, and sorry, I digressed a little bit, but being a parent, I watch Bluey in my house a lot. And Bluey, one of the episodes is the dad, there's a budgie that dies in this episode, and the bandit, the dad, at the end says, it's out of our hands. It's one of those lessons that you teach children, and it's sometimes it is out of your hands, and you can't do anything about it. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't try. You shouldn't try, yeah. But accept also that sometimes, because as lawyers, we like to take on the weight of the world on our shoulders, especially in immigration law. You can hear some terrible stories in asylum, in refugee law and family reunification and all of that, people crossing and just terrible stories. And it can be very, very, very overwhelming. And sometimes you do have to remind yourself that, you can do the best possible job, but you make the best possible effort, and it's still out of your hands. Yeah. So
that's brilliant. No, a really good answer to that. And just in terms of anyone listening who would like to know, on that note,
Sorry.
the challenges of immigration. But it's, we did speak about the rewarding aspects of the work too, and you're still here.
Yes.
How would you advise anybody who might think, well, listening to this, yes, I'd like to get involved in immigration law, whether it's in this jurisdiction or elsewhere? What would your advice be initially?
Absolutely. I think that try and do as much work experience. I always say to younger lawyers these days, just try everything, because you might have an idea of what something will look like, and it just turns out to be entirely different. And so try as many areas of law as you can. And by try, I mean do as many placements and work experience, internships, whatever it may be. And then try and then have an overview of where you want to go. But sometimes, as it did with me, sometimes the job just finds you. And when it does find you, go with it and give it your best.
Well, thank you, Miglena, for joining me in the studio today. It's just been joyful talking to you and learning about your work, and we could actually talk all day on that immigration stuff. So apart from the fact that you have a car with a timer on. But anyway, we shall meet again.
Yes.
And for anybody who wants to follow your work, where can they?
Absolutely. Well, they can find me on LinkedIn. It's Miglena Ilieva. It's not an easy one to spell, or at ilexlg.com.
Brilliant. Well, we'll put links into our episode as well. And again, thank you, and we look forward to chatting again.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks everyone for joining me today. If you like the show, please remember to share and leave a review if you have a moment. And you can also check out our website, www.activistlawyer.com, where you will see some blog articles written by our guests and contributors, as well as some fabulous Activist Lawyer merchandise.
This podcast was recorded in Granite Podcast Studio. Interested in starting up your own podcast but don't know how? Granite Podcast Studio can help. Record your podcast in our state-of-the-art studio, which is based in the heart of Newry City. Our studio has cutting-edge and user-friendly technology and can seat up to 4 people. We also provide an editing service for our team, using your guidance and editing notes to provide you with a flawless finished product, leaving your listeners wanting more. For more information on how you can get started, visit www.granitepodcaststudio.com.